Okay, welcome to the show, everybody. Okay, we are recording, we are streaming. I have a mic so I can talk. I gotta grab my phone to check the stream though. Just give me 1 second. Alright, still hear me? A little bit of feedback. Right. Okay, we are rocking and rolling now.
Funding has been provided by the Arthur Vining Davis Foundation.
Oh, Salvador Dali.
Tried without success to bring Wales into the English nation. In hostile Wales lay in English castles, manned by English troops and controlled
by untold centuries. It's something about
The era of the knight, in fact, began with chain mail, long before plate armor was invented. The knights fought desperate battles with simple weapons: swords, shields, lances, arrows, and maces. Ours is the whole story of the knights, from their earliest beginnings, through the peak of their power, to their decline, and the legacy they have...
Incentive to carve a David if it wasn't a happy age. But the truth, more accurately, is that troubling times, trying times, inspired
needed greater
individual human
protection,
beings,
both battles and tournaments. The story of the knights
to create anew. And this is true of the Renaissance.
To appreciate the importance of humanism to the Renaissance, we first need to look at the 1,000 years that preceded it. This was a time thought of as a period of cultural darkness, known as the Middle Ages. A period dominated by Christian ideals, and where great emphasis was placed on the supremacy of God over human beings in all affairs. It was very powerful and tolerated little opposition. So rigid was the church.
During the Renaissance, classical past could be upheld as a model, and that some people could consider that progress rather than going backwards.
And the heraldry that is still with us today.
in their view,
In time, rules were
their
introduced.
culture that they
Rules
lived
of
in,
war about how a
still
knight should
enmeshed
behave in battle and how
what they
prisoners
saw
should
as
be
a
treated.
dark age, dark culture. They
Because
thought
my ideas is so plenty of substantial elements that only see somebody catch
Like the-
a little particle, a little piece of my...
Particular marking.
Humanist movement.
The life of a knight was not that of books and films.
Medieval warfare was not active. It wasn't knights riding with banners flying into battles, not if they could avoid it. That was only for desperate men. It was sitting outside castles, organizing their blockading and surrender.
Siege warfare played a vital role in military strategy.
Their house has
Sieges were
been
far
built
more
up around a
numerous than
fisherman's
pitched.
shanty, which Dali bought with the money he got from the sale of his first painting.
In this room, Dali
Built up around a fisherman's
bought
shanty, which Dali...
paint next le complete Dalinian philosophy. Love Gala and dream with Gala.
For practicing.
Perhaps not.
The life of a knight was not that of a gentleman. It wasn't all glory and romance.
Knights were employees in the Middle Ages, or at least in the Ages. These professional knights were people who lived off the goodness of a great man. There were no contracts.
The age of the knight lasted for about 500 years. When we think of knights in shining armor, we are in fact thinking about the knights at the end. Armor. They wore chain mail, a helmet with a nose guard, and carried a sword and shield. In the 13th century, the mail covered the whole body. The knight's head was completely covered with a helmet. He was armed with a lance as well as the sword. By the 14th century, the helmet had a visor. The knight still wore some mail, but wore plate, legs, and his feet. 100 years later, the knight dressed in plate armor from head to toe. He no longer needed a shield. This was the knight in shining armor.
The whole idea
Here's a
of
limited
knight
edition.
is
If they
armor.
would like more information.
were written.
That's the purpose of armor. It's defensive, and to enable you to
The cartridge.
fight in the very thickest of battles and be relative.
As weaponry increased and became...
My lord, His Majesty has impressed upon me the urgency of this project. After all, we are in hostile territory.
Carpenters are already building
That's
workshops and
an
barracks.
acute bereavement. He says that in order to affirm his personality, he had to fight from the time he was born against the memory of another Salvador, an elder brother who had died prematurely.
Satisfied with the progress, Kevin returned home and reported to his king.
Since your last visit, I have laid out the boundaries of the town, which the diggers are trenching so we may build a wall.
Master James, what sufficed in King Henry's
With
time...
due respect, my lord, I have traveled throughout Europe and the Holy Land, studying the great military architecture. Your castle will be...
Renaissance.
What an odd place for him.
By the time I got my camera equipment set up, it was late in the evening.
The Norman army
I
was
knew
made
it
up
was
of
too late
bowmen, archers, and
climb that
knightly
cliff
cavalry. They swiftly advanced across the marshland to attack Harold's English army of foot soldiers, who were lined up on a ridge protected by wood.
Finding out what these sheep are doing here.
In this particular battle, we can guess there were about 6,000 on each side. That seems to be a reason.
Settled in Paris and settled down to the job of transcribing his dreams and visions, and to systematically scan.
Barracks for the soldiers. Here the great hall and kitchen and store.
Then my
And here in the
Under their arms and charged headlong at the enemy.
of Dali, because Dali only create enigmas. And America love everything is mysterious and enigmatic.
some of which have already set sail. But when the stone arrives, to maintain the pace of construction His Majesty demands, I simply must have more workers.
Normans to hack down their enemy, including the English king himself. And next to it, a figure falling with a blow to his thigh from a knight's sword. It is thought that they are both the same man.
Blacksmith Andrew from the town of Chester.
There are already many skilled smiths in Chester.
Of Florence, who amassed their fortune in commerce and banking. Cosimo de' Medici came to power in 1434. He built the first public library and filled it with thousands of ancient
centuries. It was battle practice for knights, with real weapons and no safety precautions. Tournaments were fought over miles of countryside, often village against village. Men were injured.
We began the outer curtain and the town wall foundation.
And it's thanks to the Medicis, largely, that this is so. Because the Medicis were great patrons of art.
A mass free-for-all. There were no rules. Groups of knights would set upon lone riders or attack unhorsed opponents. Chivalrous behavior took second place to winning. Losing could not only cost you your reputation, it could cost you a large ransom, your horses, and your life.
I'm through.
Sir, at least one question?
No!
Salvador Dali, do you or do you not want to do this film?
Yes.
Thank you. Salvador Dali, do you consider that experience...
You know, every time Dali is his position, Dali becoming angry. Because this is one complete idiotic... Yes, yes, yes! Yes, 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 yes! It's one traumatism.
Despite the increasing death toll and injuries, the knight...
Of your prenatal life.
Field of vision without exposing himself to the attackers.
King Richard I of England in 1194 attempted to face reality. He also needed to raise money to finance his military campaigns. So he introduced a licensing system. Tournaments were to take place at certain times and only in certain places. He issued licenses for 5 sites in England.
This is actually really
Knights had to pay fees to take part, and foreign
I don't know
knights
why
were
there's
banned
reverb
altogether.
on my
Safety measures were gradually brought in. The free-for-all was eventually replaced by individual combat, which in the end was to become
check
the
1 2. Here's another
Arms of
input.
peace,
Still
or
sounds like
courtesy,
it's got some
specifically designed for the
reverb.
tournament, were introduced during
That's
the 13th
okay though.
century.
It's kind of cool, I guess. Oh.
It's important to remember that the medieval castle is really a military machine, and every part has a specific function. For instance, crenellations like these at Carnarvon aren't for decoration. As you saw in my imaginary castle at Aberwyvern, they had a practical and deadly purpose.
Just like today, I suppose the military minds of the time were constantly trying to come up with improvements.
Sure. Look at these advanced arrow loops, arranged in the wall so that an archer could shoot in 2 directions from the same position. And the development of the arrow loop in the first place was certainly an improvement over having to expose yourself to the enemy's fire in order to shoot your own weapon. It's because of improvements like these that Carnarvon, built towards the end of the 13th century, is castle building at its most sophisticated.
For it was the first time, castles, cathedrals, and other mammoth...
During the 13th and 14th centuries, specialist armor was introduced. Arms of peace were fitted to the breastplates to absorb recoil. Weapons were fitted with coronels, 3-pronged heads to prevent them going through the visor. By the middle of the 15th century, the tilt barrier came into use. The tilt did not replace open jousting.
Advancing the
Open
revival of
jousting
Greek and
simply
Latin
continued as
literature.
another type of competition.
What makes the Renaissance different
Initially, the tilt
from the
barrier,
Middle Ages is that in fact there were people
but it was soon
as a problem.
contestants could
Thinking
still.
of it as a virtue.
Around 14,
St. Jerome
tilt up to 6 feet in height was introduced. The wooden barrier made
Bible into Latin.
the lances had to be held at an angle, which made them much easier to break instead of
Even stronger and more impressive castles in Syria.
That must have been an unpleasant shock.
I'm sure it was, but they learned well from what they saw. And
Bonjour. Good morning. Is for the first time Dali born with any kind of traumatism. Little blood, symbolic blood. And milk again, milk, and some symbol.
It appears in our story.
twice as much as battle armor. It was designed for safety and appearance. 16th century tilt armor had the helmet screwed to the breastplate to prevent it being forced off on impact.
Works in Wales,
Special
where he built 10
shields,
castles in 30 years, including all the ones we'll see.
Sounds like an entire construction company.
Well, in a way he was, but he was also a brilliant military engineer and a terrific manager. I mean, not only did he produce all these incredible designs, he also organized and oversaw all aspects of construction.
By then, his actions and writings triggered the
Ordered supplies.
Soon, other humanists
Ram,
from the Catholic.
I come on one of the rare.
Came more and more
Quite a
elaborate.
chore without cars
There
and
was
trains
even
and
a special
helicopters.
breastplate.
Before winter sets in. When I arrived at Gardner, over half of the 300 sheep
Increasingly,
were already there. What you're seeing here is a unique thing that has to happen to each ram. You see, this younger ram has always been with the ewes, and he's been going around all the big rams, butting up to them, trying to...
and minstrels.
Minstrels had a large part to play in tournaments from the earliest period in the 11th and 12th centuries right through to the close of the Middle Ages. And indeed, at this time, minstrels are in the process of blending into heralds who have professional responsibilities at tournaments. One thing minstrels could do, for example, was simply to encourage their master. song earlier that day, but when it came to the tournament, their job was simply to shout out, "Go on, go on."
The tournament produced the profession of the herald. The nobles had to ensure that the event was well organized and the rules of competition were seen to be obeyed.
Much of the music that knights heard was performed by
Also under obligation to King Edward, Lord Raymond was preparing to command the northernmost sea route to Wales.
And now an old fisherman who speaks.
Hola, Salvador. Bon dia. This is where we fishermen of Port Ligat have seen our friend Salvador.
Must have its own supplies. The upper rooms will be used for living and working space.
And this must be your dungeon over here.
Just as the trapdoor was set in the basement floor, my soldiers caught a man stealing lead from Master James's storeroom.
I'll warrant your grand social occasions with processions and evening banquets. The ladies watched and encouraged their favorite champions, giving them a scarf or a piece of material to wear in their helmets.
There is a very strong social dimension to the tournament at this. Of ladies as spectators is first found in the late 12th century.
Yards. And right at the same time, they both will put their heads down so they meet absolutely square.
So that there is a social aspect there, which is very important.
Heralds in fine costumes
are not as yet even. In their skull.
This is the reason
it keeps them from damage.
of my
Too bad. Us humans don't have that, especially bosses. I heard a lot of head banging and fighting going on, and I moved over to this valley. When I got there, it was all over. But look at every sheep here. Every ram has his lamb tips broomed off. And each one of them has fresh chips out of his horn. Now this sheep here in the front, on his left horn, you notice a splinter sticking out, that's what's left of his lamb tip. Now they went on with this rich stew for probably an hour before I got there. It's all over now. The sheep on the left has the remnants of that lamb tip sticking out to it. Our other two sheep, at the same time, are off about a half mile away. And they're going to go through this for an hour and a half. They walk over, they flog the brush. It excites them. They get all excited and all worked up. And all the time he's walking away, his tongue's coming out.
It's been quite a sight seeing these buildings going up around the ward.
The quatrain, used in earlier years to train knights in speed, agility, and horsemanship, also became a competitive sport. Originally, it consisted of a post with a revolving arm on top. To one end of the arm was a shield, and on the other end, a weight. When the shield was struck, the weight swung round, and anyone not fast enough would be hit by a solid blow on the back. The tournament outlasted the military age of the fighting knight. It continued in Europe until the 18th century. Even today, the golden age of the medieval tournament is often recreated in the Landshut festival in southern Germany. But it must be remembered that from the 11th to the 15th century, the tournament was
I placed it in a corner of the inner ward so that only 2 new walls would be required.
In men's clothing. This was a coat of black cloth with 4 buttons on the sleeve and on the bottom.
God,
When we
I
think of
love
knights,
medieval
we think of castles.
times.
This is not a romantic
Medieval times!
As in all the best adventure stories, the castle was vital to the knight. His life revolved around the castle and his relationship with his lord. A knight was employed to protect his lord and his castle. Without them, a knight was without a job.
Comfortable by the standard of the day. Large stone fireplaces were built into the walls, which were often hung with beautiful tapestries.
And in this case, this violent and antagonic animal is forced by Hermes to becoming
That second ram hit him.
the symbol of
The
law,
other sheep followed him, almost to see if he was going to lay down and die on it.
and the perfect symbol of peace. You tell me that Dali like it all time, appear desenken one clown. For me, it's very good recommendation, because in Greek, gloom is synonymous of Hermit.
And what the life of the world is worth. When one is dead,
The sheep went right on with the fake richness, getting ready for the
all
big
that remains of the best knight who ever lived. In his eulogy, the Archbishop of Canterbury described William Marshall as the best knight that ever lived. Marshall was born in 1145. He was not a wealthy man. Yet when he died in 1219, he was regarded as a great tournamenteer and, to his lord and his king, was well rewarded.
And eat with 3 fingers only, and don't gorge. Don't pick your teeth with your knife, or wipe.
How's everybody liking the stream? We got a mic now so I can chat to everybody out there. Although I gotta keep it down because there's people sleeping. But yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying the stream.
Instead of learning how to fight, learning the techniques of wielding the lance, handling the sword, and developing chivalry, the ability to handle a horse.
From so many hours of strenuous labor. Now, not all the people of Wales were peasants or lived in poverty, but for the most part, their standard of living hardly
in that high
matched the
country.
castle life.
Meanwhile, 2,000 feet below him, in the cliffs, the process of breeding
Discovering
goes
the
on.
face of death in a plastic bottle.
Arrows flittering all around you. You really needed to be out there.
We're inside a restored medieval house at the Weald and Downland Open Air Museum in Sussex.
And in this moment, Dali
The younger ram's jumping down, that old ram in the background.
Study capture.
Chivalry, or the skill of horsemanship, gave birth to the knights
And a short...
bestowed on those who demonstrated
Were damp, drafty, and often overcrowded.
Into the mysteries of the microscope and trick photography, integrates himself symbolically with the ultra-pure unities of a drop of milk, filmed at 3,000 images per second.
In Western civilization begins here.
Games, but also a marketplace where you could show off.
Sunday morning is devoted to the coves and caves and rocky masses of Cap de Creus, which can be reached only in the Catalan.
King Edward, in his time, worked closely with this force for mutual benefit.
Sheep could be raised in the hills around Aberwyvern. Wool was a lucrative trade.
Stroke. He could do this because it was united under its Saxon kings. By contrast, Wales was not. It was fragmented and posed a threat to his newly...
It takes about as much energy to paw that snow away to get that grass. Get from the grass. But the elk, with their longer legs,
Donatello.
and these go to south slopes that are blown clean, and they have a better. But a lot of snow that goes when it's cold weather. When it gets
A Dutch painter,
now,
Hubert Van, perfected the technique of oil painting.
and if you see an elk laying down in the middle of the day,
His ambition, his life's ambition, of marrying.
In this painting, the celebrated soft watches appeared for the first time. This limp-seeming and tormented rock has lent its features to the face of a picture he called Persistence of Memory, which reflects the anguished fears of madness.
so he's learned a way not to expend all his energy. This high country is grim in the winter.
Dali, we are told, paints the things that are behind things.
Corners are weak. They
See, for our wool, maybe even Italians from across the sea. Oh, Italians.
A little further along, I found this dead bighorn. If you notice the snow above,
Multiple images. Visual puns.
Weeding out the bad humors.
All 8 lived and slept in this sand.
And blowing the horn. Over there is the...
building. Now this hall probably lost its roof in the 17th century. Well, we're now in 300 years. Now, what I'd like you to do is when you go home...
that evening he could barely move.
New sophisticated instrument.
I spotted a full curl big.
Who was noted for his church music and chansons. Songs that
is absolutely necessary tell everybody Dali is the first inventor of the soft furniture. And the first soft bibliothèque is created.
advancements made in the literary world. Renaissance writers experimented with new forms of poetry and prose. They also discovered that their words had
Le fameux apocalypse, the books.
Luck was with me this same day. I spotted this man. But he didn't stay very long. Took off, started for the high country. I often wondered where he summered. I couldn't find him. He had a little isolated spot that he'd go to in the summer, and probably alone, like he is right now.
The key. King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table are the stuff of storybooks all over the world. Arthur, his knights, Guinevere, Lancelot, Merlin, Camelot, and Excalibur still hold. In the 12th century, the culture of Arthur was about King Arthur. He and his knights were the ideal model, a model of behavior that knights and sovereigns should try to copy. Tournaments reenacting the battles of King Arthur's knights were fought. The events were even called round tables. It was the tales of King Arthur that led to the formation of one of the most important knightly orders in the world, the Order of the Garter. The influence of King Arthur provided a standard of behavior, a code of conduct, and the legacy is still with us.
It is the ultimate ideal court. The importance of Arthur and Camelot is it is
Being his own irrefutable brand of logic, left the makers of this film fairly breathless when he suddenly demanded that there be created for him a 6-meter-long shirt. This shirt, he said, would be the purest symbol denuded of any sort of significance. The splendid Catalan hog.
Remember something very important that remember rhinoceros and Dali love greenish pig.
Down there, they leave their lamb with another ewe.
In 1564, he moved to London where he joined a theatre company that
To
performed...
replace all other symbols of perfection when he changed the inscription of the escutcheon of Spain.
Evidence that the historical Arthur had anything to do with knights or round tables. These were aspects of the story that were bolted on in the telling centuries later. But the stories provided an ideal model.
Dali, what is the significance of the sequence with one greenish peak? And the answer is very simple, because This greenish peak is myself, is my symbol. Greenish
Spring of the year is real.
peak, le pan héroïque, and super soft peak. After blue, Dali demonstrate le Lyonnisiaque.
For Salvador Dali, the Chinese did nothing but invent gunpowder. He gives importance only to the Mediterranean civilization, of which he considers himself the supreme. This being so, one is informed that the Greek folds over the spine of the pig can only add grist to the mill of his interpretive delirium.
When the bridge was up, it became a...
And there were also soldiers on either side of the gatehouse and above the main entrance.
Longeth and appertaineth. So help you God and his holy word.
I'd like to show you a grizzly bear I filmed years ago in Yellowstone. He's scratching his back on a tank that's 10 foot tall.
French motto, "On y soit qui mal y pense."
This bear is immense. Right after I filmed him, they started a research program in Yellowstone. They weighed the bear. They called him Bruno. He weighed 960 pounds. Now this bear is capable of killing me, but he isn't aggressive. He growled at me when he went by to let me know. Says, keep my distance. Hissed at me. There's a dead buffalo laying there. He walked right on by. It didn't bother him. Now, years ago, I used to film the bear in Yellowstone all the time. There were a lot of grizzly bears. According to their count, there was over 400. They didn't have any fatalities to speak of. They had more from
Look at the sky, the clouds. Now, and smile a little. This divine. Merveilleux. One other dot, yellow dot.
Families such as Howard and so on.
Since it was formed in the 14th century, the Order of the Garter has chronicled its own history. The oldest accounts are contained in these 3 books.
All right, then. 2 can play at this.
One other lot. 25 years in America, and this...
Don't forget, I've got reinforcements on the way.
Then let's say I dug a tunnel under the castle wall and came in by surprise.
You'd be very good.
Then that is the best way.
I didn't say that. All of these methods were difficult and risky. But the fact that they were even tried says something about the tremendous strength of these castles.
Well, if they had to be built that strong, it must also say something about the spirit and determination of the Welsh people.
Absolutely right. They were a fiercely proud, brave, and independent people. And any English monarch who forgot that did so at his own peril.
La potenza qui astonne mondo. America is the more vital, the more violent, and the more rapid of every people. This optic object is the father of all art and consists in the superposition of parabolic lenses, and these lenses exist in the more perfect manner in the areas
And farmers took turns manning the town wall.
the beginning of one new era in modern painting.
The alchemic meeting of pop art,
And as the first light of dawn broke over the mountains, Prince Davith and his troops grimly marched toward Aberwyvern.
Newton was a mathematical genius. He was also very religious. He believed that the forces of the
flour mill, the livestock barns, farmhouses. I ordered all the grain fields put to the torch. No longer will we suffer the presence of
also saw advancements in medicine. People's
With this kind of wings, but for the new generation of top and up and LSD strange creatures.
So, if the plague disrupts
Last developments of hysterical genius. It's very astonished one bureaucrat with this kind of wings, but for the new generation of top and up and LSD strange creatures is absolutely necessary to suspect almost archangelic, because in the Dalian conception,
as to be in French, the language of the English medieval court.
Fortunate townspeople made it into the castle ahead of their Welsh pursuers.
almost not completely masculine.
Museum of Art History.
The front line. But if I leave the castle without defenses, the whole sea.
The creative endeavor of Dali require preparatory and propitiatory rites. More concerned with keeping his own legend alive than with the immortality of his work, Dali is at his best within the mystic circle of his admirers. True or false? He feels, he says, responsible for beatniks, for what is exaggerated and paradoxical in beatnickery. He identifies with these young people who...
Our ships cut it off from the sea, and to starve Kevin into surrender. But when my messenger came with news that King Edward had dispatched a large force from the north, I knew we could not wait.
They reached the wall. As one attacker fell, another took his place. Boulders, boiling water, and arrows kept some away. On the point of a sword or axe.
My sappers are digging a tunnel under the wall.
Instead of hanging on the shoulders, it distributed around the body, so that the armour simply was not as cumbersome. The one piece that was the
About 1415, from which it was impossible to see anything except directly forwards with the head tilted down. A battle helmet from 1400 with a visor and a narrow slit for vision. An Italian helmet from 1510 with breathing holes. Armour was made in the Middle Ages, as it is today, by hand, by beating and shaping iron under intense heat. This will be a helmet, made from 3 pieces of hammered-out metal.
All these have various French meanings, especially this piece here. We have a section of helm, which is a Salé helm, French design. Put that case hardened, so the boys have beaten from a flat piece of metal. They've beaten it roughly to a 16 gauge thickness to finish up the helm, which is worn on the head. Been polished and finished. Quite a good piece of metal. With the visor. So here you've got 1 piece, 2, 3 pieces of metal that's shaped and put together to make a complete helmet. As you can see, it's quite nicely lined and comfortable for the wearer.
This helmet lining was made in 1484 in Innsbruck in Austria, one of the great centres of armour manufacture.
Accursed English from our homeland. Until we do, the struggle will never cease. We know that God and right are on the side of Wales, and we are willing to die for our land.
There were more battles over Aberwyvern, but in the years that followed, Welsh families began to take up residence outside the town wall.
By 1550, helmets were being made with interchangeable decorative visors. This one from Germany with an eagle's head was the parade version. Armour was available off the peg, from merchants, or of course it could be captured in battle or tournament. It could also be specially made, like these magnificent suits from the collection of the Graz Armory in Austria. At the centre, a masterpiece of the armourer's art. Made in Innsbruck in the 16th century, completely covered in a decoration of embossed leaves, with a final effect like silver embroidery on black velvet.
Think in terms of the
blanket beaver, as the mountain men would say. His skin would be 4 foot around.
aeroplane.
Big.
How many of
Usually up to
your
90
contemporaries
pounds.
have one of those parked outside,
I
ready
know
for
these
instant
beaver
use?
have to work hard before freezing. They have to get enough food supply, log, put in the bottom of the pond or around it. This time of year, the elk are always jubilant. Great sound.
The quest for the Holy Grail.
That their horses were huge and that the armour itself was so heavy they had to be winched aboard.
It is nonsense, because if you were exceptionally tall, like known as Longshanks, you could literally a chivalric virtue called Marshal Boucicaut.
Wales was successfully, though reluctantly, brought under English rule, and the next steps had to be economic and social rather than military.
Many of the things that make our lives meaningful today had their beginnings several hundred years ago, during a period of exploration and inquiry, a period populated by
A lot of things going on. I was out every day. Always a fall, chill in the air. I'd go back and check out my beaver and they'd be working that little crick. You know, they call this guy the master builder, engineer of the outdoors. I'd never had an opportunity to really watch a pair try to build a dam.
This one's for
'cause they usually do it at
you.
night.
Baker!
I thought
Baker,
it'd be kinda
Baker,
interesting to see what
Baker.
goes on.
You know who you are.
He ground his teeth at me. He just did that little shot on me just before he went away to say, don't get too close. Now, why they weren't afraid of me, I don't know. They weren't. As long as they stayed about 6 feet away, they wouldn't hiss at me and grind
By local builders who used them as quarries for stone.
sense out of this. You're better than I am. They'd stand there and look at each other, and then one would go over and get a stick and pull it down the creek. They've only got about 3 weeks to go to get a dam built. And a house. And enough food put away for winter. What's happened here is they've been run off from the other colony. They got to an adult state. This moose come along the creek, flogged the brush a little. He's getting ready for the rut. He's seems to be any rhyme or reason what they did or how they used their time.
Business class.
They grab these willow limbs, they cut off, and
I'm thinking about movies.
Sabatons, you'd have been...
The kitchen. Images they conjure up. We mustn't overlook the fact that castles symbolize a long-standing and less flattering human trait. Man's apparently insatiable desire for conflict and conquest.
Rediscovered the value of the individual by studying the ideals and artistic expressions of ancient Latin and Greek authors. This movement is called humanism.
Humanism is another one of these abstractions, like the term Renaissance. It means many things. Produced by humans. That's simply
often is that this.
he's using it kind of to hide over and look at me. The sun come out. Hello, son. Yeah, I see you. Then the sun went away, and so did he.
All right.
But he thought he was
Wanted
hidden behind that rock. I thought it
to,
was about half fun.
get on here and let you all know that we're about to land this plane here pretty quick. We're at 57 minutes, and it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. I found out some cool effects that I didn't know I had. This is really cool. I like this one. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the viewing. I had a lot of time to get this ready, and I'm glad I did, because it was a lot of figuring out some extra stuff. And that's part of the fun, right? That is part of the fun. So, yeah, thank you for watching. What else can I say?
Much armor wasn't shining silver at all.
I forgot to hit record on the VCR.
Rough from the hammer at the forge,
But I am recording on the computer.
it saved a lot of
So,
polishing. And even for those rich enough to
yeah,
employ others to
there's
do their
always
polishing for them,
mistakes.
black,
You gotta
always
always
fashionable, became the color in which to go to
work
battle.
towards
But the whole
perfection.
point of armor was the protection it gave in
Anyways,
And as time went by,
we got about a
weapons
minute
became more
and
accurate and
45
more
seconds
sophisticated.
left here.
This proved increasingly
So,
difficult to
yeah,
achieve.
just wanted to see you guys out. I love this feedback loop. It's so sweet. And this actually is from the computer feed. It's just a thing on YouTube. I know it's really loud. I don't know how to turn it down, but yeah. There you go.
Horns were at the bottom of that curl.
Oh, look at that public broadcasting service. This guy's still talking about knights. Anyways, yeah, we got 1 minute left here. Then that will be the full hour. Still don't know why I got this reverb on my voice here. Maybe there's some sort of effect on it. I don't know. Check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Any coups? Okay, well, EQ. No, it's not the REQ. Okay, we're about 30 seconds in. I'm going to turn up the reverb here. Reverb, hello.
Have movement of articulation of all pieces of the armour. He must...
And maybe we'll just go
The old
out.
Phantom Ram arrived at Gardner just after the storm, and he's limping today, probably a little stiff.
Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Good night.